On the 11th of March 2011, crowds in the city of Sendai in Japan scrambled for cover as a powerful tremor ran through the city. Most residents had experienced earthquakes before, but this was a long, dramatic, and powerful one. The shaking left the city in chaos, but there were thankfully relatively few casualties. The city's earthquake-proof buildings had, for the most part, survived intact. Citizens breathed a sigh of relief, not knowing that the disaster was far from over. Indeed, within just half an hour, large parts of their city would be all but destroyed in one of the worst natural disasters Japan has ever faced. Japan's climate, geography, and location make it susceptible to a number of natural disasters, from typhoons to earthquakes and tsunamis. The latter of these disasters are one of the most feared, both because of their less predictable nature and the sheer destruction they can cause. A tsunami is a series of unusually large waves that form as a result of the movement of vast geological features. In terms of size, speed, and power, these waves can be terrifying. Waves can rush inland fast enough and at heights sufficient enough to pick up cars, move buildings from their foundations, and completely inundate entire coastal settlements. Japan has a number of defenses in place to protect those who live and work in tsunami-prone areas. These include huge concrete tsunami walls and floodgates that can be closed to physically defend an area against waves and flooding. In addition to this, there is also a tsunami early warning system in place. This system uses data from seismographic sensors on land and at sea to calculate the likely size and arrival point of a tsunami, and then sends warnings via television, radio, mobile telephones, and in some areas, public address systems. When an alarm sounds, residents in affected areas know to evacuate urgently to higher ground. Key escape routes are signposted, and there are established safe refuge areas that are well above the height of recorded historical tsunamis. On the 11th of March 2011, a powerful earthquake took place around 72 kilometers or 45 miles off the coast of Japan. This was an extremely powerful quake. It would later be recognized as the most powerful ever to be recorded in Japan, unleashing enough energy to power a major metropolis for an entire year in the space of just a few minutes. Indeed, the quake was so powerful that it had a measurable effect on the rotation of the Earth and permanently moved parts of Japan up to 2.4 meters, or 8 feet, closer to North America. The resultant shaking was felt along a broad part of the coast of northeastern Japan. It was significant even as far south as Tokyo, but was most seriously felt further north, including in the city of Sendai, which was the closest major city to the epicenter. Buildings shook violently, power lines fell, and the electricity supply failed. Roads cracked and the ground opened. Cars swerved, furniture toppled, and some smaller structures suffered serious damage or even total collapse. Thousands were injured over the course of the 6-minute shake. Thanks to Japan's sophisticated earthquake early warning system, most people had been given around 30 seconds of warning and were able to prepare themselves. Minor injuries were widespread, but there were relatively few deaths. As the shaking subsided, though, there was worse yet to come. Within 3 minutes of the end of the quake, a tsunami warning had been issued. Sirens sounded and loudspeakers broadcasted pre-recorded messages, telling residents across a wide swathe of the coast of northeastern Japan to flee to higher ground. In huge numbers, they did so, following established evacuation routes to predetermined safe evacuation zones. These zones were sometimes on natural hills and sometimes simply the tallest and most secure building in the area. Arrangements varied from town to town. Around 30 minutes after the earthquake, the first wave arrived. From the vantage point of their designated safe evacuation areas, hundreds of thousands watched its approach. A dark band on the horizon became a roaring tidal wave, appearing to be 30 meters or 100 feet tall in places. By the time it broke over the coastline, it was laden with debris, and picked up more as it swept through coastal towns and cities. Boats, cars, buildings, people, all were picked up by the wave and rushed inland at speeds of up to 48 kilometers, or 30 miles per hour. One survivor later recalled the experience of being in his car when the wave hit. The cars in front of me were hurled back into mine, and we were all washed far inland. I barely got out through the window, but then I was swept away by the oily, stinking torrent. I was thrown into a car repair shop where I grabbed hold of a staircase and climbed onto the second floor. With great effort, I was able to pull 3 people to safety. A few of us survived the rising water and the cold, snowy night, but we were unable to save others who were calling for help. The wave was bigger than expected. It instantly overtopped many tsunami walls. Nearly 100 safe refuge zones were also swamped. People had thought that they were beyond the reach of the wave, but the rushing waters swept them violently away and carried on far further inland than the tsunami warning system had predicted. As entire settlements were inundated by monster waves, thousands struggled for survival. One such individual was 24-year-old Miki Endo. Her refuge was also her place of work, as she was employed by the town of Minami Sanriku's Crisis Management Department. Dozens of evacuees had gathered there, with some awaiting the wave on the building's roof, the highest accessible point for miles around. Miki Endo remained lower down in the building, carrying out her work duties. She was tasked with broadcasting warnings to local communities using a public address system. She continued this work until the very moment the wave arrived. It was tall enough to sweep dozens of survivors from the roof, and to blast through the building, stripping away the outer walls and leaving behind only a skeleton. Miki Endo died at her post, having used her last moments to continue to send out warnings to those further inland. A small number of those sheltering on the roof above her survived by clinging to railings and aerials, but this was just one of many supposedly safe areas that were consumed by the tsunami. Elsewhere, at Okawa Primary School in Ishinomaki, just under 100 students were evacuated into the playground after the earthquake. There they remained for 40 minutes. Their teachers knew that the school wasn't in an area normally at risk from tsunamis, and chose to prioritize keeping their charges safe from possible aftershocks. When they were informed that a tsunami could potentially reach the school, they began to lead the pupils to higher ground. The school was at the base of a series of hills, and had the student body set out immediately after the quake, they would certainly have been able to reach a position of safety before the arrival of any waves. As it was, they had left it too late. They were caught by the onrushing tsunami. 74 students out of a school of just 108 lost their lives, along with 10 of their teachers and support staff. The majority of survivors only survived because they were absent or were collected by their parents after the quake. Out of those that were caught in the tsunami, only 4 survived. Scenes like these were repeated across a huge area of coastal northeastern Japan. In places, people escaped death by inches, just barely managing to keep their heads above water in flooded buildings and rooms. In others, people escaped the waves with only seconds to spare. Those in a high or secure enough location to be safe from the waves watched helplessly as people were caught and carried away by the water. The tsunami lasted several hours. When the water eventually began to recede, however, further danger became manifest. It was already cold, with temperatures close to freezing across much of the affected area. Now, in many ravaged towns, snow began to fall. This snow would continue to be a feature throughout the rescue and initial recovery over the days that followed. In total, approximately 19,759 were killed by the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, the vast majority of them by drowning. Many more would perish due to the disruption and difficulty of the weeks that followed. Elderly residents perished in shelters. Medical patients had urgent treatments delayed, and many families struggled to go on when not just their home, but their entire community had been destroyed in the blink of an eye. On top of all this, another disaster was unfolding even as the rescue effort began. Near the town of Okuma in Fukushima Prefecture, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was flooded by the tsunami. The power plant was among the most secure and disaster-proof in the country, but the unprecedented conditions took their toll. At 3:36 p.m. on the 12th of March 2011, approximately 1 day after the earthquake, a massive explosion took place at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. As one disaster ended, another, potentially even more severe, was about to begin.